Well, hey, good day to you. Welcome to Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. It is October 2nd, 2017. I'm Tim Patterson, Trade Show Guy, owner of Trade Show Guy Exhibits out of Salem, Oregon, a project management company. I'm also author of the book Trade Show Success, 14 Proven Steps to Take Your Trade Show Marketing to the Next Level. I'm a blogger as well, going on 9 years at TradeshowGuyBlog.com. So I blog about all things to do with trade shows and events. Been a weird week. In fact, for the last 3 days, for at least 3 days last week, I had no websites. I had no business email. It happened on Sunday night. I woke up Monday morning and nothing was there. And I went, what the heck? I called up my host, the Bluehost folks, and they said that I was maxed out. I had no idea I was maxing out. And it took at least 3 days. I'm recording this prior to this actually happening on Monday morning, because I've got a recorded interview I'm doing. But as of my time of speaking of this on Wednesday afternoon, I still have no website. I still have no business email. It's very strange. So I've been reaching out to people through telephone calls, as well as current projects and things, as well as a home email address, just to keep things moving. Anyway, this week on the Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee, I've got a special guest, Brad Kleiner. Sandler sales trainer that I've had the pleasure of working with for the last year or so. He's with Flywheel Training in the Portland, Oregon area. And I caught up with him at his home office recently to discuss what he does, as well as go over a few items that face salespeople everywhere. And yes, that includes on the trade show floor. And good day to you. This is Tim Patterson, Trade Show Guy. Monday Morning Coffee is underway. And my guest today is Brad Kleiner, with Sandler trainer, and the company Flywheel. Did I get all that right, Brad?
Yes. Good morning, Tim. Great to be here. Thanks for having
Very
me
good.
on.
You have that nice wood, kind of cabin look behind you.
Yes. It's my home office, which I enjoy. It's a timber frame. And I like being out here in the woods when I can.
Very good. Very good. Well, so I've been in your sales class for a year now and have learned a ton of great stuff. Sandler's system is very good, and it's helped me a lot. I want to just kind of get into a couple of the aspects a little bit, dig a little deep into these. And one of them is what we like to call staying behind the pendulum, but, it really grows out of a typical salesperson who hasn't been through a training or doesn't understand how it works, wants to be very anxious and answer all the questions. Someone comes up to them, maybe in a trade show, maybe not, maybe it's a sales call, and they say, so does your widget do this? And of course, the typical salesperson will say, well, yes, of course, let me tell you more about that. And so what do you recommend, or what is a kind of a better approach which helps uncover more information?
Yeah. Tim, I think it's funny with the trade show, it's almost like a sales call on steroids, because you can see the transaction that kind of goes on as people are in the trade show floor. And I think the people walking by might have an interest in what's happening there, but they're hesitant to approach because the fear is that the person at the booth there is going to lock on and not let go of them. So there's a lot of this unspoken uncertainty on both the buyer and the seller. So I think the typical salesperson is really, if someone shows interest, they want to jump right on them. And like you mentioned, tell them all about it, the features and benefits and how great it can be, and kind of get your contact information and let me follow up. And so, as you mentioned, behind the pendulum is just to do more of the opposite of that and to hold back a little bit. And if someone says, oh, I've heard good things about your company, a lot of times an inexperienced salesperson will say, oh yeah, we've been around since 19 whenever, and give them all of the certifications and experience. And that maybe pushes the prospective client farther away, instead of saying something like, oh, it's interesting. I'm glad you said that. I'm curious what you heard that thought we might be a good fit or we could work together. That's kind of an example of being behind the pendulum. We're not always the right solution for every organization. Can we maybe have a little longer conversation, and we'll be able to determine if it makes sense to talk further. So if you're being a little bit less eager than they are, that will oftentimes draw them in to have a better conversation, so you can really determine if you're the right fit, and not assume that you're going to be the right fit for every prospect that comes by the booth.
And I think one of the challenges of being on the trade show floor is that your goal really is to find out if they're a possible client, if they are a true prospect or someone who's just kicking the tire, so that you're qualifying and disqualifying. And then if you have qualified them, figure out what the next step is and move on to that. So you're not necessarily going through the full-blown sales process on the floor. Now, some people, depending on the size of the company and the situation, that may happen. But I think more often than not, you're looking to figure out what the next step is after you've qualified them, and so maybe you're moving quickly to that. So you're kind of short-circuiting it a little bit. You're still using the techniques. That's my kind of gut look at how that would work on the trade show floor.
Yeah, because you're right. I think the goal there is just to see if they have an interest. If they're qualified, then you might look at a next step, what that might look like, and not go into the sales process right there, because you might be missing other qualified prospects as they walk by if you're engaged. So if you can qualify or disqualify and then set up the next step, which might just be a further conversation with that qualified prospect.
Yeah.
And we always talk about training, as you know, not everyone is qualified. And so your job initially is to determine if there's a fit or if there's not a fit, and to be okay if they're not a qualified prospect, so you can spend more time with those that are qualified, and then you could actually help.
And I think that's a great sort of attitude to have about all that, is because, when I first got into sales, it's like you want to sell something to everybody because you figure they're all in the trade show world. I can sell something to anybody, but it may not be that you're a good fit for them. And certainly along the way, I've learned that, yes, this is a good company that does great stuff, but what we do specifically and what they want does not match up well. And so you kind of have to figure out what that fit is. And so I've used that phrase a lot. I just want to make sure that we're a good fit with each other, from your side and from my side. And that actually kind of helps people relax a little bit, because they're thinking, oh, you're not like trying to just sell me the first thing that you think of. You actually want to make sure that it does work for both sides.
Correct. And staying on that theme of being behind the pendulum, if you give them the permission and the understanding that they might not be a right fit, you might determine that, they can determine that, either way is fine. That usually lowers the wall of defense, and they can have a more open conversation to determine if you might be able to work together or you might not. And I think that really is the kind of the Doberman effect. Someone had told me that, if you're more relaxed than that prospect, they're going to be a little bit more relaxed as well. And they can maybe share what's really going on in their business, and you can decide if it's a fit. But if you're so anxious and so eager to keep talking and ask these questions, then it puts them off. And a lot of times you might have a prospect that then turns away because they don't want to be kind of in the radar of that eager salesperson.
And I think the other thing that kind of transitions into is how to uncover someone's pain, because they will tell you at the outset, well, we need a new booth because it looks bad, but there's a lot more to it. So how do you uncover what's really going on there? What kind of processes do you look at?
Yeah, I think one of the first things is just the awareness that what they're telling you might not be the whole story. Most people, especially at a trade show setting, if they don't know and trust you yet, they're not going to share what's really going on in their business or the real issues with their booth. And so you need a little bit of trust and rapport. So a lot of times what they're telling you initially might not be the whole story. It's kind of what's above the surface, the things that are easier to talk about. So we use a technique just of reversing and asking more questions to really uncover what the real issue is. And if you can build a little bit rapport with the prospect and get them talking about what's important to them and what's important to them emotionally rather than just intellectually, then you can start to uncover some of the issues and some of the pain points. And not everyone has a pain that you can solve. And that's going back to determining if they're a fit or if they're not a fit. But if you can get them talking a little bit more about what's frustrating to them, what they're worried about, their emotional pain, then you have a better idea of determining if it does make sense to talk further and if there's a fit.
Yeah, and to go one step further is like we talk about a lot is okay, they may tell you that okay, this looks ugly and it makes the company look bad, but it may get down to much deeper than that if they can't figure out how to solve this problem, their job may be on the line, and that's the emotional part of it. That's just an example. There may be a lot going on when you talk to people.
Right. Yeah. And the initial stuff is somebody has an ugly booth or it's outdated. That's more of an intellectual problem or a challenge. But as you said earlier, it's the emotional part of that, the personal impact. So once they start talking about personal impact, that's really a sign that you're on the right path and you've got the rapport where they can share with you more of their pain or the issues that are really happening.
Very cool. I just wanted to touch base on a couple of items that we have talked about over the last year in the Sandler class. So if people want to find out more, how can they track you down, Brad?
Sure. You can go to the website. It's www.sandler.flywheel.com. And my email is bkleiner, Kleiner, at sandler.com. So either way, the website or just shoot me an email. I'll be happy to talk to your listeners and viewers more about this topic.
And you also do some occasional like 2 hours or 1 day boot camps and things to kind of introduce people to the system. So that's also the thing you probably would find at the website, or you could tell them if they contacted you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that, to have them join as a guest to some of the executive briefings that we do to talk more about this topic and a few other topics as well.
And you're in the Portland area. All the offices in Wilsonville. That's the greater Portland area. So people can find you there. So if they're listening in San Diego, that probably is not a good fit, as they say, right?
That's right. But yeah, happy to take a phone call or an email and to talk to any of your listeners or viewers about this topic for sure.
Brad, a pleasure chatting with you today about some of the sales techniques that we've discussed over the year. Thank you.
Yeah, great, Tim. Great to see you again, and thanks for having me on as a guest. Take care.
All right. Thanks again to Brad Kleiner at Flywheel and Sandler Training. He's a sales training expert with Sandler, and I appreciate him joining me on this week's video blog and podcast, Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. This week's Trade Show Tip of the Week. Trade shows are great for a lot of things, including getting your products and services out in front of people, but it's also good for spying on or scouting out the competition, however you want to term that. It's one of the best ways to learn about your competition. You can see so much about their company at a trade show. You can see what they look like, what they wanted to express their brand in a trade show. You can see what their people are doing. You can see what their new products are. You can see how people react to them. You can see so much. So spend some time scouting out your competition, as well as folks that you might end up working with as well. There may be a complementary strategic partner sort of thing. So scout out your competition. This week's one good thing. In the middle of last month, my wife and I flew down to San Jose and took a rental car over to Monterey and spent a night at the Monterey Jazz Fest. Oh boy, was that fun. We went there specifically so she could see Herbie Hancock. She's a big Herbie fan. And his band, just incredible players, 5-piece band. And Herbie's like 77 years old. He got up and did a little jumping around. He's an extremely talented guy. And his band was just fusion, jazz, funk, you name it. And I thought, when 2/3 of the way through the hour set, then some people got up and walked out because it wasn't traditional, lounge jazz or something. I thought, they don't get it. I could listen to this guy all night long. A lot of fun. So that was our one good thing. Got also a chance to drive around Carmel and Pacific Grove and Monterey, an area which I've been at a lot. My wife has never been there, so that was a lot of fun to show her around. And that's it. That's our show for this week. Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. I'm Tim Patterson. So much appreciate you stopping by and taking a look. Have a great week.